Episode 53. I think we're making progress. Actual progress. After having looked things up, of course. Gotta get back to the library. Gotta find those last two letters that I looked up the location of. And I guess from the library, that's the path to get all of the realm sigils. I think that's probably where I'm going to call it with this game. There are extra challenge modes and all of those trophies. I don't think I'm going to go and do all of that. That might be a huge commitment that I'm not ready for. Maybe someday, but maybe I'll just call it the finale if we solve all of the realm sigils. How about that? That's the current plan anyway. Even then, it might take a while to do all of that, considering we have to rely on a lot of RNG, even if I have a vague idea of what I have to do. For now, it's just the library. I forgot which book we checked out, but one of those books should lead the way towards, stuff with Blackbridge and eventually the throne room. And of course, at the same time, I have to work on unlocking the vault. Let's start with the outside room. What was her name again? I didn't take a picture of it. Because we tried Joan S. for Simon. And I think I thought her name was Samantha or something based on one of the passports, but that was obviously an alias. The dad was Daniel, so we tried Joan D. Wasn't there what was it, an M? Joan M? I don't remember what I wanted to try, but I think if we find whatever indicated her first name again, I can make a little detour to Blackbridge to try one more attempt at her name. Although I'm pretty sure it's going to be something from the vault, right? One of those passport aliases. I'm not too thrilled about any of this stuff. It's been a while since we did the root cellar, but I don't find it particularly useful. Just digging more, I don't know. Well, what if the experiment triggers off of digging? Which is just a random shot in the dark, but I don't think we have to worry about spending steps instead of diamonds. I don't think so. 2 special items. I would prefer the tool shed on any other day. But I guess just because it's been a while, I'll go for the root cellar. Besides, all we're really trying to do today is get it's a green room, so there might be something inside. Yeah, all we're trying to do today is get the library. Well, that's not all we're trying to do. The vault, of course, too, but if we're just trying to get the library, we don't have to worry about, gearing up with a bunch of items and whatnot. This is a green room, but I don't think it's, got an item in it. At any random chance or whatever. Or maybe I just haven't been lucky enough. This is only the second time I've been in this room anyway. Oh right, her name is Mary. Yeah, that's where the Joan M was. I was thinking Marion. Her name is Mary. I guess I could try that now, although I don't think it's going to be any help. But it's not a long walk, so I guess we can try it. Any of these other names? We know Herbert. I guess that's right. I was wondering about the bedrooms last time, her ladyship's chamber and the master bedroom being separate rooms. I guess Herbert was the master and he was never married, and then the lady's chamber would have been Clara Epson's, or maybe probably not Baroness or Avel. Yeah, it was probably just that Clara Epson was using the house, and they had like an entire wing and room dedicated to her, or something like that. Alright, I'm not sure there's any more information we can get from this. Actually, I should take a picture of this just in case, since I never did. And there. The fact that it's kind of torn off on this side makes me feel like there's more to the right. Just because whenever we've seen like a torn piece of paper, well, I'm mainly thinking of the map in the underground, we found the other parts of that in a different location. Oh hey, I forgot. I noticed the running shoes taking effect, but... okay, that's a little weird, but yeah. That does actually confirm that the moon pendant can carry over itself into tomorrow. Which I thought would be possible, but it's not exactly the most exciting result. Especially when we bought out the entire showroom yesterday, and all we're bringing over is the cheapest item from the showroom and a pair of dusty old shoes, or whatever. But I guess this is fine. We have the moon pendant now, so I guess we can strategically pick up items. If we never pick up, like, more items than this, then I guess we can just carry over these same two items ad infinite, which is, I mean, it's not exactly the best loadout in the world. But we can also just strategically pick up items so that we don't pick up any clutter or whatever. Not that I'm going to do that, but it's just a thought that you could do it. So this isn't going to work, but we're trying it anyway. Joan... M. That figures. What about Epson? We've never really tried that, but I doubt she would use that name, right? Epsm? I guess it would be Epsm. Yeah, okay. And on with the day. We no longer have our berry blessing. I kind of miss it already. And I should have gone for the shrine last time, but whatever. I guess we can just start heading towards rank 8 and try to grab the armory again. No box. Yeah, the chapel. Why not? We can do it early on. I don't care. In fact, I'm not carrying any money right now. Guess we'll pick that up later. I mean, I guess the pool hall, sure. We do want to go north, though. I said north. This isn't north. That's the only one that isn't a dead end. $19. 20 divided by 10 is 2, which is right here. 16, and then this was minus, so that's 6. And then the next is multiply, so that's 30, divided by 10 is 3. And then this is 10 minus 4 and 2, which is 4. Times 2 is 8, divided by 2 is 4. 2 keys. And this adds the Great Hall Foyer and Secret Passage. That's the bonus that I picked from the upgrade disc. I think that's a pretty good thing. The Secret Passage is just nice in general. But usually there's like these things in the draft pool anyway, right? I guess this means like there's more chance that it appears, or there's two of them in the draft pool. Alright, so this gives us a chance to go back north, even though we have to spend a gem on it. Well, here's a shovel and a metal detector every time. Metal detector. I want these two items, and I guess I'll buy them shortly. Maybe the salt shaker isn't a bad investment if we're gonna dig up some turnips. Okay. We'll draft the kitchen, but we're kind of in trouble. We don't have any more gems, so I'm gonna have to turn around. Let's just start messing around in the lower ranks, I guess. And once we're done down here, we can pick up the allowance and leave. It's gonna be a dead end no matter what. Give us the dice. Mainly just need some gems right now. Oh great, I would have liked this. That would have been great. Maybe I would have liked the hovel after all. We got a lot of keys though, and a lot of steps. Maybe we'll get the morning room behind this door. We're in trouble. This is why you need gems. I guess just draft this. I guess we can open this, yeah. There might be gems inside. Nope, it was 2 keys. Alright, here's a gem at least. Maybe I should be going for the funeral parlor, but we can't really draft the funeral parlor right now. We absolutely have to go north of the kitchen or we're done for. We've got some dice for some retries, but yeah, take it. And let's read our bonus. Maybe there's actually some diamonds in the stars for us. Oh, there's one. More keys. Florealis, bloom of the sky. Green rooms are more likely to contain special flowers today. Okay. Probably not the green rooms I've already drafted, right? Which is just the root cellar, I guess. Was that already in the book? I guess it must have been, yeah. The number 21. Well, that would give us some gems. Alright, so we got 2 gems and 2 dice to go north here. But before we do anything else, I think we want to do this first. Might as well buy everything, I guess. Oh wait, but I have the moon pendant, so I don't just want to fill my inventory with clutter. Whatever. We can't just play for tomorrow, we have to play for today. Sleeping mask? For steps? Nah. Maybe? It's only 8. Okay. And now we're gonna go all the way back and dig up... Well, actually... Maybe we wait on digging things up. If we can, like, trigger an experiment, first we have to make sure we can actually continue today. Courtyard, perfect. Any special flowers? I guess there are. So that's what these empty flower pots are for, I guess. Or have they never been here until just now? I feel like I've seen them before, though. Maybe I'm just imagining it. Morning room isn't bad. And suddenly we're drowning in gems, thanks to the lucky stars. And more dice. We could passageway. But 6 gems isn't that much. We'd suddenly just be down to 4, and that's even less. Locked trunk isn't bad, or rather the hallway isn't bad. We can always draft out of the foundation, I guess. I think we're starting to get in the range where some cheeky security doors are going to show up. More dice. Dice won't help with the security door, though. And suddenly we're geared up to the max. Aquarium, huh? This could have gems inside, but beyond that. The drawing room is common enough, right? And there's that free gem now that we looked up and solved that puzzle. Just give us the aquarium. I prefer to use the drafting room in a place where we can redraw all of the rooms. Sure, use one of my several keys. We could do this. The emerald bracelet. We suddenly wouldn't have to worry about the gems anymore. But we're kind of swimming in gems, aren't we? Well, kind of. Not really. Should I even pass up this opportunity? I shouldn't underestimate how useful the emerald bracelet is, even though I have 6 gems right now. If I were to get something else, it'd probably be the greenhouse, but that's really only because it gives us the lever, and we would still need like the broken lever, and even then I'm not even going for the antechamber. The code check. And we'll be sure to check this back in when we're done. Sure, pool, why not? Alright, we've got security doors now. It's beginning to become a problem. Unless there's one inside one of these boxes. A keycard? No. Just more dice. Yeah, we're kind of in trouble now. If things don't go the way we need them to, literally, go in the correct direction. We can start with a pantry, but I'm afraid it might end up being a security door. But I guess there's like no better room that we can redraw for using the dice that would guarantee it wouldn't be a security door, unless there are specific rooms that can't be a security door or something. Whatever. Some extra delicious apple. With salt. Alright, we'll do the passageway. Just because we need the doors. Maybe... Let's hold off on this door, although it doesn't matter. I was thinking about the trigger conditions for Her Ladyship's chamber, but it doesn't matter because we don't have the tomb and no key. The library, and we can draft south of it. Perfect. Alright. We got what we wanted today. And some change. Before we read this, though, we've got all these dice. We might as well get that last book. These are very good rooms, and I guess that should be obvious when you're drafting out of the library, but it's kind of a shame to pass these up. Obviously the passage wouldn't do anything, but the study would be what I want, I guess, with all these gems that are useless. It would be what I want, but we need the bookshop. Package still in transit. Seriously, the bookshop really should spawn a bit more frequently, shouldn't it? There it is. Alright, hit me with that last book. And we're done with the bookshop forever. Oh, that's nice. This becomes a window. That's suddenly much more appealing. How nice. It really is a nice little nook. I can imagine just reading for hours there or something. Although your back might get tired because there's no place to rest your back on. Right, so the book that we checked out was The Curse of Blackbridge, because this should be what gets us into Blackbridge, right? Here. So we're the first one to check it out, okay. This book was graciously gifted by Simon B. Jones. Oh, right, because we're the first one to check it out because it wasn't in the library until we bought it. The Curse of Blackbridge by Redford Ewing. Foreword. The legend of Blackbridge is one that's well known to the people of the Grand Realm, for versions of this tale have been passed down from generation to generation. With each new telling, the story has changed, becoming over the years more colorful, more verbose, and, as one might expect, increasingly horrifying. It's a horror story. Great. However, with so many renditions and unique personal touches, the task of confining and binding this tale to text seemed an ambitious and impossible challenge. Over the course of my research, I have heard dozens of variations of the legend, and while the details would often change, I was surprised how much of the story's heart remained the same. Yet the more I listened, the clearer it became that there could never be a definitive version of this tale, capable of capturing all the wonder and myth of Blackbridge. In the end, I chose to write down what felt most authentic, the story my grandmother told me as a boy, long ago. Part 1. The Berry Picker from Oris. We're probably gonna have to settle in for a long time here. It'd be nice if we could settle in that nook. Instead, Simon's just going to be standing here. Many years ago, before peace had become a familiar word, there lived a group of rogues so wayward that the locals deemed it appropriate to call their number the Unholy Hounds. They were feral outlaws composed of society's worst in a time when society was at its worst, and for each crime that fearful travelers credited to the group, a dozen more they unclaimed, each worse than the last. For the gentry, however, who often value their coffers more than their companions, no crime could measure more wicked than the group's primary enterprise, high road robbery. One such member of this so-called band of rogues was a boy of 13 years, Jesper, who had not been lucky in life, having lost 2 brothers to war and parents to famine. In the years of hunger that followed, Jesper lived in a gutter behind a churchyard, relying on the nourishment of scurrying bugs and weeds, harvested from the cracks of the alleyway to sustain his pitiful existence. It is not surprising that a child aiming to escape such hardships would take any easy road out, an easy and well-traveled road paved with temptations, leading out of the city and into the gentry lands, where loose purse strings entwine with the strands of salvation and glisten equally to the hope of opportunity. You think your grandma read this story to you as a kid? There's a lot of long sentences here. Very prosaic, I guess. But it's fine. It was this road that eventually led Jesper to the end of his use, a hidden cave at the bottom of Blackbridge Canyon. It was here that he met his surrogate family and saviors, that notorious gang of godless outlaws known as the Unholy Hounds. Despite the hardened circumstances that had led him to this vocation of banditry, Jesper was surprisingly tender-hearted, and was often teased by the group for being too kind for such an ignoble life. For this reason, Jesper was assigned the innocent role of berry picker. It was not just innocence that set berry picking apart from the gang's more wicked undertakings, for it was the only duty performed without the safety of night's concealment. Jesper, no stranger to solitude, did not protest that he alone worked while the others slept soundly, tucked away in the cave at the bottom of Blackbridge Canyon. On one such occasion, Jesper decided to get an early start. He left the cave, berry basket in hand, and set out into the woods before the morning sun had even brushed against the tallest treetops. It was colder in the mornings, but the headway dawn afforded meant Jesper could reach the furthermost berry patches without worry of being chastised for tarrying upon his return. It took over 3 hours on foot to reach his destination, and along the way, Jesper had passed by many a familiar bush, all priorly pillaged and so bereft of berries that one would have to dedicate several moments in earnest examination before finding a single one. Jesper was patient, but even patience has its limits. He was confident that even accounting for the time lost to this long stretch of travel, his efforts would be well worth the pains. Surveying the patches in this new grove surprised even Jesper. The red dots suspended among the leaves seemed as numerous as stars in the skies. Upon seeing such a bounteous sight, he clutched his berry basket tightly and nearly toppled over out of joy. Once he had regained his senses, Jesper quickly made a decision. He would not reveal the location of this newfound treasure. Instead, he would earn the respect of his confederates who, upon seeing his yield, might attribute the success to hard work. Smiling at his plan, Jesper set off to fill his basket and was making steady strides in his task when the sound of thundering hooves interrupted him. A carriage is approaching. The thought of it made Jesper freeze. Had he been so enchanted by his discovery that he had neglected to observe his surroundings? How could a roadway be so close? He ducked down and crept toward the impending sound, hiding behind one of the larger bushes nearby. It was only a moment before the sound's source revealed itself. Within 50 paces of where Jesper hid, An elegant carriage with gold trim came soaring around the corner of trees, led by 2 beautiful white horses, and conveyed by a stern-looking driver seated atop the vehicle, flaunting the most sophisticated regalia Jesper had ever seen. It was not just any carriage, it was a royal carriage. Even without ever having witnessed such a sight before, Jesper was certain. The sight had so transfixed Jesper that he stood awestruck, unable to tear away as the carriage approached. The little concealment the bush provided was soon proven unequal to the driver's lofty perch, and upon spotting the boy, he pulled the reins with such effect that the noble steeds slid to a sudden halt, with precise control. "You, boy, get out from behind that bush," he shouted with a rigidity that betrayed a modest amount of fear. "You startled me half to death coming round the bend of my own drive, and me seeing such an unfamiliar face in a place where there ought not to be any." Jesper quickly contemplated running. The man was much older, and his dress was suitable for courtly behavior, not dashing through the bramble and mud. I was picking berries." Jesper raised a half-filled basket up to allow the driver to see the proof of his words. The demeanor of the man suddenly changed. It was a change that Jesper was familiar with. He had many times seen the same stern expressions on the most fiendish bandits melt away when presented with a berry basket. Any suspicions that the driver might have had instantly evaporated, for even the notion of a member of the unholy hounds picking berries seemed farcical. The softened expression even made allowances for a smile. "Berries, eh? Say, you couldn't have picked a better spot for them, could you? I used to pick berries here as a boy." Jesper took his cue to finally step forward out from behind the bush, proudly brandishing his basket. "I know, and what luck I found them. I've only just begun picking, and look how many I have. It would have taken me 4 full the time back home to procure this number." The driver bent down for a closer look. "And where is your home, boy? It must be quite far." Jesper replied with a scripted response. "A little south of Tanner Fork, just past the burnt woods." "My God, that is far. You couldn't have come all that way only this morning." It was true. Tanner Fork was in the exact opposite direction that Jesper had traveled, and while that response would seem perfectly reasonable in a location closer to Blackbridge Canyon, he could see why it might seem less believable here. "Sir, I have traveled much farther for much less profit. I dare say there is no distance yet made by man that would not be worth undertaking for a prize such as these. Surely you have tasted them for yourself." Jesper felt happier with this response as it seemed to amplify the man's smile. "In my youth often, but perhaps I took it for granted, because I never had to travel very far. And even then my father would always drive us here in our carriage, so I'm ashamed I never had to walk such a stretch to earn an equal reward." It was Jesper's time to smile. "And let my efforts reward us both today." He raised the basket even higher. "A taste in memory of your youth, sir." I just saw the italic text kind of stand out. I mean, there's like a lot of italic text, but I don't know, just that. Well, we'll get to that when we get to it. The driver chuckled and removed one glove, bending over the seat to reach down to the basket, and at the moment his fingers touched the first berry, the dagger in turn met his throat, cutting through a superficial layer of skin and drawing blood. Jesper caught the man's startled eyes. "And for that taste, I will have your purse, sir, in memory of my youth." Yeah, they did say it was kind of a horror story. Not like a ghost story, but I guess pretty chilling, I guess. The horrors of humanity. The driver's arm had gone stiff, his chin raised and trembling, more frightened than he had ever been before. Whether unable or incapable of speaking, he did not respond to the boy. Perhaps he did not think his jaw could afford to be engaged at this particular time. Gee, you think? Jesper let the basket drop, freeing his other hand to probe the man's pockets. "Do not mistake me, sir. I will not kill you if you give me no cause. Though I will admit, the thought of taking your carriage and leaving you the indignity of walking appeals to me. Unable to find a purse in the man's coat, Jesper pivoted to search the seat under him. Why have you no purse upon your person? The driver slowly raised his hand cautiously, pointing toward the carriage door behind him. Jesper lowered the knife's edge a small degree to allow the man to speak, which he did in turn softly. There's a lockbox in the carriage. So yeah, I guess that's italic because he's speaking stiffly, I guess, with the knife at his neck, but just when I read that line, when I first turned to this page and saw that one line stand out, it made me think of the box at the back of the car. Not that that's ever been like anything important, it's just had like items inside, but I don't know. Well, come down then and grant me the courtesy of sparing your life and binding your hands, a concession I assure you of my tender heart, for it would be much easier to slit your throat. The man started to comply, slowly lowering himself from the driver's seat of the carriage. Once down, Jesper guided him away from the carriage to a nearby tree, where he instructed him to get on his knees and put his hands behind his back. Excusing his inexperience, the man indulged Jesper while he figured out how to adequately bind him. The smile and kindness Jesper had seen on the man's face, now nothing more than a distant memory. In their place, cold, dark eyes, displaying no emotion. I wonder, should I grant you the same clemency you are showing me? Jesper stopped. Oh wait, that was the man. I wonder, should I grant you the same clemency you are showing me? Jesper stopped, surprised by the question, but ignored it, secured the final bindings, and then hastily returned to the carriage. With one hand on the door's handle, he turned back to the man. If there is no lockbox, there will be no clemency. Inside, the carriage was surprisingly dusty and unswept, a stark contrast to the elegant and polished golden facade of the exterior. It had apparently been many years since a passenger had enjoyed passage in this vehicle. This all but confirmed what Jesper had suspected. The driver of this carriage was not a liveried? I guess that means wealthy or something. The driver of this carriage was not a liveried servant in the employ of some greater master. Any curiosity that this observation might have further produced was quickly abandoned upon seeing what rested under the carriage's back seat, a large wooden lockbox. Despite its hefty appearance, the box was surprisingly easy to handle. Within a few minutes, Jesper had dislodged it from its hold and carried it out into the sunlight. Inspecting the box carefully, 2 observations were made. Totemic symbols found carved on all 4 sides of the box hinted that the box was very old and likely not created by Arindian hands. It reminded him of artifacts from the Old World and was presumably crafted in one of the ancient realms. I see, those symbols on all 4 sides. Secondly, the box was secured by a rusted yet robust padlock and would not easily open without a key. Jesper looked over to see the driver quietly observing from his indentured position. Do you perhaps have a key you can provide me to open this box? Without emotion, the driver replied, There is no key to that box. Okay, I think we're getting into this, the actual ghost horror story of this tale, I guess. Jesper stood up. Easy enough, then. He headed over to a nearby rock of sizable dimensions and lifted the stone up, carrying it back to the box. If there was ever a time when that lock had been resistant to brute force, it wasn't recent. With one hit, the stone had completely shattered the rusted lock. He bent back down and opened the lid. Inside was an effigy, a crude figure chiseled from stone. Without too much deliberation, Jesper bent down and picked it up, somewhat surprised how heavy it seemed, given how light the box had felt. Having expected to find something more akin to gold or gems, he looked questioningly to the man, hoping to find an explanation. That's an interesting use of the word gold and gems, because those are actual things that we, the player, can get from boxes or something. Is this maybe implying that we can get something other than gold and gems from some kind of box or something? Where was I? Right. The driver's smile had once again returned. You are cursed, boy, for deadly is a stone. You have opened that which should never have been opened, and you are cursed. Jesper carried the effigy over to the man and shoved it in front of his face. What is it? That's one. Feeling his disappointment rising to anger now, Jesper tightened his grip on the effigy. One what, you mumbling agentor? I don't know what that means. And in God's name, why have you no purse upon your person? The man did not seem intimidated. 1 pace. He paused for effect. 12 more, and you will be dead. Maybe playing into the amount of steps that we have, just like in a day or something? He only had a second to flinch before the effigy struck him in the head and put an end to his cryptic ramblings. If there was ever a time when the old man had been resistant to brute force, it wasn't recent. Har har. I mean, it was a pretty good turn of phrase, sure. But, that's pretty morbid. Jesper looked down at the sculpted stone figure, now splattered red. Was it cursed? Was he cursed? He had of course heard stories of curses and had never doubted their validity in the past. But now that he was standing face to face with the possibility of being cursed, his mind pleaded with him to be skeptical. And if he was cursed? What difference would the knowledge make? A dozen more paces would not be enough to find another living soul, to say nothing of the chances of procuring a remedy. If he did not move from where he was, or from where he now stood, he could live maybe another 3 or 4 days, maybe more, given the abundance of nearby berries. A plan that, if we ignore its obvious faults, might provide additional opportunities for help to come along. But what good would that do? To be discovered here, beside a body, stolen goods in hand, bloated from berries and raving about a curse that could very well not be real. No. It would most certainly be better to face one's fate now. Take a dozen paces, and see if life goes on. But Jesper found his legs unable to make that first step. His mind was unable to convince his limb to waste away 1/12 of his life in a single motion. Feeling the desperation sink in, he hopelessly looked about him for a solution. I mean, I've been there, right? Whenever we're running out of steps on a day, and we have to gauge however many actions we can do before the day comes to a complete and total end. But I guess this is far more dire for Jesper, considering he's gonna die for real. Maybe, if you believe the curse. And if, by some stroke of luck, the gods had heard his plea, a miracle materialized before him as if he had found himself suddenly at the end of a fairy tale. I guess we've also experienced miracles when we've had very few steps remaining in a day. 2 white horses and a carriage of golden trim were beside him. Okay, here we go. I was beginning to think if the old man also had some kind of way to get around his, if he had the same curse going on and if he had a way around it, but here's the answer. The answer to his immediate prayers. He left at his fortune and calculated the short number of paces back to the road. 4. Perhaps only 3 if he jumped. He made a quick survey to see if there was anything he wished to grab before taking the plunge. He thought about removing the driver's fancy coat, as that appeared to be of some value. But the additional risk of undertaking such a task, too great to chance. And so, after a profound breath, he took his 2nd, 3rd, and 4th steps, though they were quite large. It's funny how much this has in common with just playing the game, how you have to make decisions of just passing up an opportunity, or if you don't make the right decision and try to go for everything like I did a few episodes ago, you end up failing completely. Seated now behind the horses, he reached for the reins and suddenly realized that he was still gripping the effigy. If the curse was real, then it would most certainly be better left here. If, on the other hand, the story was fictitious, there might be some appraisal that could be made of the figure. It was, after all, found within a lockbox, whose typical function oft secures objects of value. Having witnessed firsthand the horrors of destitution, Jesper found his mind equally reluctant to allow his hand to let go. If it is cursed, I die. If not today, then tomorrow. And if I die, what care have I? And with that statement said aloud, to the horses, seemingly, Jesper took up the reins with confidence. Part 2. Below the Black Bridge. And just to check, I don't want to spoil myself going off of, pictures or whatever. I'll just try to ignore the pictures, but how long is this story? It's 2 parts. Okay, we can read the rest. A story in 2 acts, I guess. Miller awoke to some light nudging from a familiar foot. To some light nudging, is what it said. Only one person would have the cheek to awaken her in such ill-mannered fashion. Shaking the sleep from her eyes, she glared up at him in the darkness, but did not say a word. He nudged her again, teasingly, then stepped back into the den. After taking a moment for her eyes to adjust to the darkness of the cave, Miller remembered. She was on third watch today. Quietly collecting her things and wits, Miller turned as she left, waving to her young friend, who was more than likely already asleep. She crept through the cavern's main passage, careful not to wake the sleeping bandits around her. Like a hero in a book, she often mused. Quietly, she grabbed a bow from the haphazardly formed pile of weapons, shaking the accompanying quiver in the darkness to assess how many arrows it held. She then walked towards the sun-drenched mouth of the cavern, ready to start her shift. Above her, in one of the few trees found in the canyon, Miller could see that Ravia was already posted. She waved and Ravia waved back. Calling out to each other was strictly forbidden. Anything louder than a gesture in the canyon was forbidden. When Miller reached the tree, Ravia lowered a braided rope and pointed to the ground behind her. Miller turned, following the finger, and saw a pail of water resting beside a nearby log. She turned back to Ravia, nodded, and secured the pail to the rope. The pail went up first, and in turn, Miller followed. Ravia reached across to grab the water. Miller leaned back to give her space. There was not much room for maneuvering in this tree post, a necessary concession for the concealment the outpost demanded. Ravia tilted the pail up to her mouth dramatically, illustrating how thirsty she had been. Miller laughed silently as water poured out, splashing onto Ravia's face. It was a bit too daring and noisy of a joke, and had the others been around, they would have certainly been scolded for the unwarranted sound. But Miller appreciated the efforts Ravia took to verbalize the silence of the morning. They had been on third watch together for over a month, and during that speechless time, their friendship had grown into something special. Affection was unsurprisingly scarce among the unholy hounds. She had felt camaraderie before, of course, but intimacy, never. From their elevated vantage, the girls could see both the concealed entrance of the cavern, as well as a clear view of the bridge that was spanned across the canyon. Black Bridge was the link between the Gentry lands and the northern mountains, the overpass that connected Orris and Reddington. Interesting. Orris and Reddington, huh? To the city-faring travelers of the realm, the bridge was an unavoidable crossing. In the day, the task was to ensure that travelers passed by without stopping. At night, the task was to ensure that they do. Like most of her band, Miller preferred the night. The biting glare of the sun might be tolerable to farmhands and bricklayers, but to a cavern house bandit, it was a source of constant annoyance. In the day, there was no shroud to conceal her expression, nor to hide her thoughts. She felt exposed. Ravia touched her elbow and pointed up. Miller, striving to suppress a budding smile, suddenly shook her head in response. There were many signs that the unholy hounds used in lieu of words, but the two of them had developed an extended vocabulary. Gestures quietly forged in the shared solitude of their months among the branches. She watched as Ravia shifted, placing her palms flat on the floorboards beneath them. Miller knew what she was trying to say, but shook her head a second time. It was often more fun to pretend not to understand. Ravia rolled her eyes and turned away, looking back to the canyon. Squinting through the leaves, the two girls held still, watching and listening. It was not long until Miller, too, heard the sounds of approach. Ravia held up two bent fingers, and a few moments later, two men emerged from the bridge's southern end. They were dressed in a familiar uniform, long gray coats with black facings, white waistcoats, and black tricorn hats. They belonged to the local patrol, the Blackguard. Although not an everyday occurrence, their presence at Black Bridge wasn't an unusual sight. It typically indicated an important traveler's impending passage across the bridge, information that the girls would promptly relay to their leaders as soon as the coast was clear. But this report, while exciting, was rarely acted upon. In Miller's 5 years in the Unholy Hounds, she had never once seen a carriage taken in open daylight when the Blackguard was nearby. I guess that would be the Blackguard on the bridge itself there. The men had nearly reached the bridge's north end when Miller heard the horses, faintly at first, but growing louder with each passing moment. Ravia's eyes met Miller's, the same concern mirrored in each other's expression. This did not sound like the typical carriage, cautiously approaching the bridge to cross. Instead of the familiar crunch of the high road's gravel, they heard the harsh clattering of hoofbeats against stone. Both girls quickly redirected their attention downwards, looking through the foliage. The sounds were not coming from the high road, but from the canyon itself. The horses were coming from below the bridge. In an instant, Miller had knocked an arrow and drawn her bow. Go! Ravia was gone before the whisper had even left Miller's mouth. The young scout was already sliding down the bank below, racing toward the cave. There was no road that ran below the canyon. There was no reason for numerous horses to be approaching their cave. There was only one reasonable conclusion, and both girls had reached it instantly. The base had been compromised. This was a Blackguard attack. The moment the horses came into view, Miller let loose her first arrow. She was surprised to see a carriage. She had expected cavalry. Before she even finished processing that thought, her second arrow was in the air. Without a trail, it would be unthinkable for a carriage to traverse such rough terrain. Yet she watched as the wheels jolted over the rocky riverbed. The third arrow was now in flight, and there would be no need for a fourth. The driver slumped over just moments before the vehicle dipped into a small ditch, slamming into an embankment. The force of this sudden halt immediately shattered the front two wheels and catapulted the driver from his seat. Utterly confused now, Miller quickly glanced over her shoulder to see if any horses were also approaching from the rear. I guess Jesper didn't really have a great plan. Where was he going to take that carriage anyway, right? The only place he could go was back home, and apparently home is where people shoot at you on sight. Down in the canyon, the entire horde of the unholy hounds came spilling forth from the earth as if hell itself had suddenly sprung open. The group seemed even more bewildered than Miller, half asleep and tripping over one another in a desperate attempt to engage an unseen enemy in combat. Miller could see Ravia among their number, the only one looking up at her. Her expression was chilling. There would be no need for a silent gesture to convey what they both now realized. They had made a mistake. The gang's chieftain, Jeffrey Heartslasher, what a name, led the others, cautiously approaching the crashed carriage, like a suspicious fox would, near a baited trap. There were no words exchanged as the group crept forward in customary silence. A dozen or so paces in front of the wreckage lay the far-flung driver, an arrow now protruding from his broken body, and beside him, a blood-stained effigy carved from stone. Miller was inconsolable. Jesper had always been her favorite. He had always shadowed her in the night, clinging to the hems of her every move. The way a child tails behind an older sibling. Tender-hearted, she had always called him, though deep down she had known that wasn't quite true. His appearance of gentleness concealed a raw, resilient durability that emerged in the most perilous of situations. I guess so, if he managed to calculate the steps to the carriage and come up with a plan, even if that backfired on him at the very end. He had been a flower among the nettles of this cave, but he still had thorns, honed by a grim past, and 100 hands of misfortune. Make that 101. They buried him in the darkness, in the back of one of the larger cavern rooms. He was interred with a berry basket and a silk handkerchief that he had treasured. The mysterious effigy they had found beside him served as a distinguished gravestone, a marker that stood out as somewhat special among the rows of similar swords marking neighboring plots. No one spoke, not even in whispers. There was nothing to say. Miller awoke the next day, and my eyes are again drawn to the one line that's like italics or something, kind of standing out on its own, but we'll get to that. Miller awoke the next day to a thunderous shaking and rattling of the earth, a far cry from the playful nudging of the previous day. She strained to adjust her eyes, but the choking sting of stirred-up dust caused her to flinch. Panic was also in the air. The sounds of scurried footsteps and clattering feet filled the space around her, but even in alarm, the silence was louder. What was it that sounded so strange? Miller closed her eyes tight and used her feet to guide her along the passage. The whispers around her were getting louder, and intense voices could be heard ahead. Louder speech than she had ever heard spoken in the canyon. A growing dread as Miller approached the mouth of the cave. Her eyes now open, wide despite the dust. Shouldn't it be day? Miller felt a hand in the darkness, pulling at her. It was Ravia. The two embraced, and Miller did not need to see her to understand. Ravia placed 2 bent fingers against Miller's cheek, and with that touch against her face, Miller felt the same sinking feeling from the previous day. 2 bent fingers confirmed what Miller had suspected. The girls had forgotten to relay one critical piece of information to the others. An hour or so later, the screams began. Blood-curdling cries of hopeless desperation. Captain Fodrick Lee of the Blackguard looked down from the ridge of the canyon to the collapsed entrance of the cave. "Ah," he grinned. "Now they speak." And that's the end. A pretty chilling tale, I guess. I think I'll have to reread these last few paragraphs because I didn't quite get what was going on in the end there, but it was pretty good, I think. There was characterization, there were moments of humor. It was pretty long, yeah. I guess it took us most of the episode, almost 40 minutes to read. You'd probably go by it faster if you weren't reading it out loud, but all the same, I kind of enjoyed it. But how does this help me progress the game? I don't actually know. I think I'll probably just have to end up looking up how this book might be useful for progressing the game. If this is even related to getting the throne room, or into Blackbridge. I assumed it would be helping us get into Blackbridge, but I don't know, all we really got was something about a box and I don't know. Well, that's it for the episode. I guess the title of this episode is called The Curse of Blackbridge. And I guess I'll just have Simon stand here in the corner with a 1,000-mile stare, wondering now if he's cursed too. Now would be a good time to take a break.